Okay, so in this part of Learning Module 10, we're going to take a look specifically at the capital budgeting process. So as we've said so many times, budgeting, especially capital budgeting, goes back to mission. You've got to understand what you're trying to do as an organization, how you're doing it, what your goals and objectives are, and hopefully that comes from having a very good strategic plan that you operationalize, that you're working towards, because going through the strategic planning process is also going to help you identify some of those longer term goals that are then going to feed into the capital budget. So oftentimes organizations will also have a capital improvement plan. And so especially if you have a building, especially if you have equipment, if you have heavy capital assets, then you're going to want to have an improvement plan. You're going to want to understand when you're going to need to replace your computers. You're going to want to understand when you might need a new roof on your building, that sort of thing. All of those things would be considered part of your capital improvement plan. Okay, so when you're putting together a capital budget, there's a couple key things to consider. The first is to understand that sometimes you don't generate revenue. Sometimes you're just going to have expenses. So for example, at the Historical Society, most of our capital budgeting was in terms of purchasing new equipment. You know, we had 3 computers every year that we would replace. Well, it probably cost us, $3,000 to do that. And we didn't specially fundraise for it. We didn't need to go into debt and take out a loan to do it. So instead, our capital budget would just have an expense line item. And from, different than an operating budget where you're pretty much going to have your personnel, your other than personnel, your utilities, your rent, things like that. With a capital budget, your expense line items are going to vary by project, by type of organization that you are, by whatever it is that you're trying to buy through your capital budget. So determining what you're going to buy is key, as we'll see on the next slide when we talk about life cycle costing. So your book talks a lot about this concept. I'm going to hit some of the highlights here. And the idea is that when you are doing a capital budget, when you are making a capital acquisition or purchase, you need to determine not only what it's costing you today, but what it's going to cost you over the lifetime of what you're buying. So the easiest way, or the easiest example I know is, say you are a nonprofit organization and you're ready to buy a van. Well, there's all sorts of different passenger vans that you could buy to transport seniors to their medical appointments. You have to determine what is the best one for me to buy. And you don't only want to look at, what does it cost me today to buy? You need to look at, well, how much does it cost me to, put the gas in? Every van might have different fuel mileage. Some vans might be more expensive in terms of their kind of cost of ownership, their maintenance costs. Some vans might have a great reputation, so they last a little bit longer, so I can use them longer, while others may have, very poor resale value, and so I kind of have to drive them into the ground and then get rid of them. So the life cycle cost is really looking at everything, the total cost of ownership. And so you're going to add the acquisition cost, you're going to add the operating costs, what it costs you on an annual basis, what you're going to have to build into your budget essentially, maintenance costs, so whatever it's going to cost you to maintain this asset, and then if there are disposal costs associated with that, the example that they give in the book is, are you working with toxic chemicals? I'm not sure most nonprofits are, but it certainly is something to at least ask the question about. The key is, how do you know all of this, right? In order to successfully put this equation together and compare one asset to the other, you have to be able to make at least a guesstimate on the operating cost or the maintenance costs. The acquisition cost is probably going to be pretty upfront and easy to understand, but you've got to be able to estimate the other ones. And that's where, it's really hard to do. So oftentimes, I'll be honest with you, we do default to, well, what's the acquisition cost? And if we know something about the operating cost, great. But it's very hard to figure that information and feel really good about it. So that's a little bit about the capital budgeting process. Next up, you can go to capital financing.